Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Truth That Heals podcast. I am your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and this episode is going to be a little bit different from a lot of the most recent episodes that I've been uploading. And the reason is it's the end of the year, but I also thought that it's time to really fill you all in on what's going on. And I'm really excited. I'm trying to continue developing the podcast, but I need a pause and to not just a recap, but I really want to look at the origins of this podcast, of the Truth That Heals podcast, because when I first started this journey, I had no idea where I was going. I had no idea what was going to happen. I know that there are so many amazing, talented podcasters, YouTubers, or people in so many different professions who they have this amazing inspirational mindset and they know what they're going to do. They know what their routes are going to be. They have milestones that they know that they're going to conquer. And when I started this, there was no real ambition, there was no real direction. But from the inception of this podcast, there was a desire to capture positive and inspirational uh, uh, people, inspirational activities, people who do amazing things despite their personal difficulties. That's kind of the direction I wanted it to go in the beginning when I first started. But I was scared. I was afraid because I didn't like the sound of my voice. And actually, before I even did the podcast, I was doing blogs. And the way I started the blogs was by talking to strangers. I know that's not probably the most uh, wise thing, but I I was talking to strangers during my travels, and sometimes I would learn some street wisdom, and maybe I would blog a little bit about that. But deep in my mind, I wanted to I wanted to have the courage to just grab the mic and start recording, doing a podcast. I wanted to have that confidence to stand before a camera and to just look amazing and to just deliver. But it's not a talent that I was born with. And so, like I was saying, I really had a desire to capture inspirational people, events, inspirational or words of wisdom. So I started converting from the blog life and started shifting to the podcast life. And I'm sharing this because maybe there are so many other people who are listening. This isn't a huge podcast, but if anyone is listening who may want to do something big, but they're afraid, maybe hopefully my words can give some inspirational courage or something. But anyways, I was afraid. I was afraid of my voice. I hated my voice, but I just knew that I wanted to do something for my life. I just wanted to add some purpose. And what I did was it was during a lunch break and I asked one of my coworkers if he would like to be on my podcast. And uh, this episode with this coworker, it's still on the air, it's still published, and it's my first episode. And the backstory of that interview, it's like only 3 minutes long. This episode, but the backstory is that I didn't have and I still don't have, the nicest equipment. I didn't have the most refined interview process, the most refined voice. Uh, and so my coworker was like, "Sure, I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. Like, well, when will we do it?" And I told him, Right now." So we went into the quietest place, which was my car, and I picked up my iPhone 6, and as you can see, it's all beaten up. And for those who are listening, for those who are listening and not watching the YouTube video, I'm showing the iPhone 6, which I actually used. I'm showing it to the audience. But anyways, so we got in my car. I pick up my iPhone 6 and I press the record button, and we just went. And to be honest, when I started, it wasn't the best. It was actually quite terrible, and I even deleted a few of the episodes after that, because they were too chaotic, too no direction. But I left that first episode uh, with my good friend, because I wanted to leave a remembrance of where I started, and it wasn't it wasn't the not just the best, but I was so afraid, and I had to get my coworker, and that's how I like threw myself into the ocean of podcasting. But as time went on, I was doing like a podcast like every 3 months, every 4 months. So within a year, I did like 4 episodes, and uh, I deleted like three of them and only kept that first one, which was with my coworker Aaron. I think the name of the episode is "Skating Misfits." Totally cringe for me now the way I did the interview, but the funny thing is that after doing that episode, I or after doing that first year, should I say, I felt a need for me to be authentic. I was losing myself, because I felt that there's a story that I really wanted to get off of my chest. And for those of you who've really been listening, it's been, especially that first, second year, I was talking a lot about religious abuse within a Catholic community. And it was painful for me because I still am Catholic. And a lot of people expected that the podcast was going to be a Catholic podcast because I came from that religious community. And then when I do this podcast talking about religious abuse, talking about cult like tactics, I received a lot of hate and a lot of pain from people who really uh, really sent me very uncharitable comments, uncharitable messages. But the reason why I did that, it was because I don't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. I also think that parents, family members, they deserved to know what happened in the community that we were in. And what saddened me most, I think, is that people were quick to assume that because I was speaking about religious abuse, that I was no longer a person of faith. Some things that I was told was I must be an agent of Satan, that I'm trying to destroy something that's holy, and that's what people are going to think. I can't control people's thoughts. I can't control people's comments, but I know where I stand. And it wasn't this me doing the podcast or me doing the blogs, talking about uh, religious abuse. It wasn't done out of hatred. I did it because I really wanted to bring the truth out there. And anyways, something happened which I didn't really intend, but uh, it was that a lot of people were then at first they thought that it was going to be a Catholic podcast. It's not a Catholic podcast. I'm very open on different topics, different conversations. So people were at first, the people who know me, a lot of them were either disappointed or they were angry or they just tuned out. So that's fine. But then afterwards, after I started talking about the cult stuff, I believe that the audience shifted to just the cult community or ex cult community, and that's not really where I want to stay. Because I really the reason why I started this was for my own healing, for one, and also because I just wanted to produce things that were able to capture positive, inspirational material, inspirational people, great advice, words of wisdom, things like that. So then the podcast started going in the direction of cults, and I think that people assume that it's just going to be a podcast regarding cults, and I'm not going to stop talking about religious abuse. I'm not going to stop talking about cults, but that's not going to be the heart of the podcast. So now at this point, just to give like more of an update, because I've been very busy with my personal life, with work, and I've been wanting to do this episode for so long. It's actually been a few weeks, and I've done so many outtakes. But this is I'm just gonna do one today, and this is it. Um, I don't want this podcast to just stay in the cult world or to just stay in the Catholic or religious abuse world, and I don't want it to stay in that universe. I really want to go back to the roots of why I started this podcast, which was to bring like educational, inspirational material. And so in the next few episodes to come, and maybe forever and ever after that, until this podcast ends, I'm going to try to be inviting people who have been through their own struggles, or for the Christian world, uh, for the Christian lingo, I want to invite people who have carried their personal crosses, who carried their crosses, and were able to get through whatever their struggles were. We're able to get through it and maybe have words of advice, or maybe they wrote a book and I want people to check out that book. So this podcast is not going to stop talking about uh, cults, but that's not going to be the heart of the podcast. The heart of the podcast is going to be inviting people from different backgrounds. Some might be cult survivors. Some might be people who are pastors, or maybe from different religions, Buddhists, atheists. There have been guests on this podcast who, I guess you could say, have a sort of hatred for religion, but they still have an openness to talk about their personal healing journey. And so I'll invite them because the conversation, the discussion is a sincere attempt towards healing, either of the mind, of the heart, of the body, or spiritual healing. And so I'm open to inviting people from all different backgrounds, as long as it's like the end goal is to really talk about healing and to talk about their own uh, their own wisdom. I want to hear different forms of wisdom, but at the same time, just because I'm open to discussion, I want people to know that I am a person that I have my faith. But even if I didn't have my Catholic faith, I don't think it should matter. I think people should be open to discuss, open to hear people out, whether they are Christian, whether they are atheist, Buddhist. But anyways, uh, it's been a long few weeks trying to get this episode out, but I just want you to know that I I really have the desire still to again go back to the roots of the podcast, which is to produce positive stuff. So, for the audience who are listening to the podcast, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, because on my YouTube channel, I'm going to start putting like more of a storytelling. Uh, it's going to be different. So I'm going to have the podcast like on Spotify or what else on Apple Podcasts. I'm still going to have like the interviews. That's going to be mostly on the podcast platforms. But on the YouTube, I'm going to try to produce more content, a little bit different. So just stay tuned. Subscribe to my channel, because that always helps me out. And if you haven't followed me on Instagram or Twitter, feel free to check out the show notes. I'll leave my usernames there. And again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. So that's it for today. Just wanted to give a bit of a recap, and I just wanted to be honest and open and to make it clear where it is that I'm going with this podcast. So it's not going to be a cult podcast, although on the YouTube you will be seeing some story form video uploads. But again, this podcast is going to try again to go back to the roots and talk about inspirational, positive, and healing topics. And sometimes maybe it'll get a bit dark, but I'm all up for it. I'm down to do this. I'm excited. So thank you to all the audience members, those who have been listening. I want to give a shout out to my fans in Ireland, particularly to John and Crystal, and I also want to give a shout out to my cousin Mauricio. He's the one who actually made the music for the intro of this podcast. So I want to give you all shout outs, and to everyone who's been listening, to everyone who has supported me, or even to those who have left me nasty comments. Thank you, because you've really kept me going, and you really kept my mind going, and it's been a journey, and I don't regret it. So everyone, have a great day, have a blessed day, and until next time, I'm Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and you've been listening to the Truth That Heals podcast. Have a good day.